don't judge somebody on the decisions that they made when you don't know the options they had to choose from.
It looks like Hulk Hogan's daughter, Brooke, could be facing serious time behind bars after new evidence linked her to some of her father's shadiest dealings. And with Hulk's long history of scandals, the real question is, what has he dragged Brooke into? Let me break it down. The rise and fall of America's wrestling family. It seems Hulk's death left more than just grief for his daughter. He left baggage, and things aren't looking good. But before we get into what Hulk may have dragged her into, we need to go back to where it all began. The story begins in the golden era of professional wrestling, when Hulk Hogan was transforming from Terry Gene Bollea into the most recognizable face in sports entertainment. Born on August 11, 1953, in Augusta, Georgia, Hogan would rise to become not just a wrestling superstar, but a cultural phenomenon that transcended the squared circle. With his signature mustache, bandana, and the rallying cry of Hulkamania, he became the face of the World Wrestling Federation during its most explosive period of growth in the 1980s. But behind the scenes, the man who preached about training, prayers, and vitamins was building a family that would become both his greatest joy and his ultimate downfall. In 1983, Hogan married Linda Claridge, a former flight attendant who would stand by his side as he conquered the wrestling world. Together, they would have two children who would grow up in the spotlight: Brooke Ellen Bollea, born on May 5, 1988, and Nicholas Allen Bollea, born on July 27, 1990. For years, the Hogan family represented the American dream. Hulk was the ultimate good guy, the hero who always triumphed over evil, while Linda played the supportive wife and mother. Their children, Brooke and Nick, were being groomed for their own entertainment careers, with Brooke showing early promise as a singer and performer. The family lived in a lavish home in Clearwater, Florida, seemingly living the perfect life that millions of Americans could only dream of. The family's decision to allow cameras into their home for the VH1 reality series Hogan Knows Best in 2005 would prove to be both a blessing and a curse. The show, which ran until 2007, gave viewers an intimate look at the Hogan family's daily life, but it also exposed the cracks that were beginning to form in their seemingly perfect facade. Viewers saw Hulk's overprotective nature toward his daughter Brooke, including the infamous GPS tracker he installed in her car to monitor her movements. The show portrayed Hulk as a doting but controlling father who struggled with his daughter's growing independence. In one memorable episode, viewers watched as he reacted with barely contained rage when Brooke brought home potential suitors. The show became VH1's highest-rated series at the time, but it also began to reveal the dysfunction that lurked beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family. Brooke, who was just 16 when the show began, found herself navigating the treacherous waters of adolescence under the watchful eye of both her overprotective father and a national television audience. She had graduated high school at 16 and was pursuing her music career with the kind of determination that seemed to run in the Hogan family. Her debut single, Everything to Me, topped the Hot 100 singles sales chart, and her album, Undiscovered, would eventually peak at number 28 on the Billboard 200. But even as Brooke's career was taking off, the first signs of serious trouble were beginning to emerge within the Hogan household. Nick, the younger of the two Hogan children, was developing a passion for cars and racing that would soon lead to tragedy. By 2006, he had earned a Formula D drifting license and was competing in events, with his father's full support and encouragement. However, Nick's driving record was already becoming a cause for concern. Between 2006 and 2007, he accumulated multiple speeding tickets, including a citation for driving 115 miles per hour in a 70 miles per hour zone, and another for driving 106 miles per hour in a 70 miles per hour zone. These weren't just teenage indiscretions. They were warning signs of the reckless behavior that would soon shatter the Hogan family's carefully constructed image. The tragedy that would mark the beginning of the end for the Hogan family occurred on August 26, 2007, when 17-year-old Nick crashed his Toyota Supra while street racing. The accident left his passenger, John Graziano, a U.S. Marine veteran, permanently disabled with severe brain damage. Nick, who had been drinking and was racing another car at high speeds on a wet road, was charged with reckless driving involving serious bodily injury. The aftermath of the crash would expose the ugly underbelly of the Hogan family's dynamics. In leaked jailhouse phone calls, Hulk was heard making shocking statements about the accident, including blaming the victim and making racially insensitive comments. Nick pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 8 months in jail, but the damage to the family's reputation was far more severe than any legal consequences. As the Hogan family reeled from the scandals surrounding Nick's accident, their personal lives were simultaneously imploding behind closed doors. Hulk's marriage to Linda was crumbling amid allegations of infidelity, including a particularly devastating affair with Christiane Plant, who was not only a family friend, but also someone who had worked closely closely with Brooke on her music career. The betrayal was devastating for Brooke, who felt personally violated by the affair. Linda filed for divorce in November 2007, and what followed was one of the most acrimonious celebrity divorces in recent memory. The proceedings would drag on for years, with both sides making increasingly bitter accusations against each other. Linda would later accuse Hulk of being an intimacy addict and a complete liar, claims that would be supported by Hulk's own later admissions about his numerous infidelities. The divorce wasn't just about money or property, it was a battle for the souls of their children. Brooke found herself caught in the middle, initially siding with her mother, but trying to maintain some relationship with her father. The stress of the situation was enormous, and it began to take a visible toll on the young woman who had once been the darling of reality television. As the family's public image continued to deteriorate, Brooke attempted to distance herself from the chaos by focusing on her career. Her spin-off show, Brooke Knows Best, premiered in 2008, focusing on her life as a young adult, trying to establish her independence. The show provided a glimpse into Brooke's struggle to define herself outside of her family's increasingly toxic dynamics, but it also highlighted just how much the family's problems were affecting her personally and professionally. The show depicted a young woman who was mature beyond her years, forced to navigate complex family relationships while also trying to build her own career in the entertainment industry. Viewers could see the strain in her face, the weight of being the responsible sibling in a family that seemed to be spiraling out of control. The series ran until 2009, but by then, the damage to the family was becoming irreparable. During this period, Hulk was also dealing with his own personal demons. He later admitted to being suicidal during the divorce proceedings, and friends close to the family reported that he was struggling with depression and feelings of isolation. The man who had once been America's hero was now seen as a fallen idol, someone whose personal failings had destroyed not just his own life, but the lives of his children as well. The financial implications of the divorce were staggering. The settlement ultimately gave Hogan about 30% of their $10 million in assets, but the emotional cost was far higher. The family that had once been the epitome of American success was now a cautionary tale about the dangers of fame, ego, and unchecked personal behavior. As you'll soon find out, at this point, the worst was yet to come. The racist scandal that would emerge in 2015 would not only destroy Hulk's professional relationships, but would also drive the final wedge between him and his daughter Brooke. The pattern of behavior that had been building for years would finally reach its breaking point, leading to an estrangement that would last until Hulk's death in 2025. The racist scandal that destroyed everything. If the Hogan family's story had ended with the divorce and Nick's car accident, it might have been remembered as just another celebrity family that couldn't handle fame. But in 2015, a scandal would emerge that would not only destroy Hulk Hogan's career, but would also drive the final, irreparable wedge between him and his daughter Brooke. Irreparable wedge between him and his daughter Brooke. This wasn't just about family dysfunction anymore. This was about racism, betrayal, and the ugly truth about who Hulk Hogan really was behind the cameras. The scandal that would change everything began years earlier, but it wouldn't come to light until 2015, when the National Enquirer published transcripts of audio recordings that had been secretly made during Hogan's 2007 intimate encounter with Heather Clem, the wife of his friend Bubba the Love Sponge. These recordings would reveal a side of Hulk Hogan that was so shocking, so fundamentally at odds with his public persona, that it would effectively end his career and destroy his relationship with his daughter forever. The recordings captured Hogan using racial slurs repeatedly, including the N-word, while discussing his daughter Brooke's dating life. But it wasn't just the use of racist language that was so damaging. It was the context in which he used it and the vile things he said about his own daughter. In the recordings, Hogan expressed disgust at the idea of Brooke dating a black man using the most offensive racial language imaginable, and even calling Brooke a for her relationship choices. The immediate fallout was swift and devastating. On July 24, 2015, WWE fired Hogan, removing him from their Hall of Fame and scrubbing his presence from their website and merchandise. This wasn't just a suspension or a temporary punishment. This was a complete erasure of one of the most important figures in wrestling history. The company that had built much of its success on Hogan's broad shoulders was now treating him as if he had never existed. For Brooke, the revelation was particularly devastating because the racist comments were specifically about her and her personal relationships. The betrayal was profound and personal in a way that went far beyond typical family disagreements. Initially, Brooke's response was to defend her father publicly. She gave interviews, and in one of them she said,
"I don't support what he said."
But he's my dad. I love him. That's not who he is, though. He's not racist.
She even wrote a poem on Facebook defending him, emphasizing forgiveness and family loyalty despite the controversy. The poem included lines about how if people knew the father she knew, they would understand that he had raised her well and taught her that people are more than their worst moments. It was a touching display of loyalty from a daughter trying to protect her father, but it would later become something she deeply regretted. What makes Brooke's initial defense even more tragic is that she was clearly trying to reconcile the father she thought she knew with the man revealed in those recordings. She later admitted that she had been misinformed, manipulated, and lied to about the extent of her father's racist views and behavior. The realization that she had publicly defended someone who had spoken about her in such vile terms was devastating. Hulk himself attempted to explain his actions in a later interview, saying
I was at the lowest point of my life. My personal life was destroyed. I was very mad at my daughter. I was upset over a situation that happened between her and her boyfriend, and I had no idea I was being taped.
But his explanations only made things worse. When asked directly if he was racist, he responded saying,
No, I'm not. I'm not a racist. I never should have said what I said. It was wrong. I'm embarrassed by it. But a lot of people need to realize that you inherit things from your environment.
His attempt to blame his upbringing and environment for his racist views was seen by many as an inadequate excuse that failed to take full responsibility for his actions. The damage to his reputation was irreversible, but more importantly for our story, the damage to his relationship with Brooke was just beginning. The racist scandal wasn't happening in isolation. It was occurring against the backdrop of an already fractured family dealing with multiple crises. The recordings that captured Hogan's racist rants were made in 2007, during the same period when his son Nick was dealing with the aftermath of his car accident and the family was going through their bitter divorce. As the 2015 scandal unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just about one racist rant caught on tape. Additional recordings from jail calls during Nick's incarceration revealed more racist language, including Hogan making statements about not wanting to be reincarnated as a black person and expressing other racially charged views. The pattern of racist thinking was undeniable, and it painted a picture of a man whose public persona was completely at odds with his private beliefs. For Brooke, the accumulation of evidence about her father's true character was overwhelming. She began to realize that the man she had defended was not the man she thought she knew. The professional consequences for Hulk continued to mount. Beyond WWE's termination, multiple other business relationships were severed. Sponsors dropped him, appearances were canceled, and merchandise featuring his likeness was pulled from stores. The man who had once been worth an estimated $8, $15 million saw his earning potential evaporate virtually overnight, but perhaps more devastating than the financial losses was the personal cost. Brooke began to distance herself from her father, and their relationship, which had already been strained by years of family dysfunction, began to deteriorate rapidly. The racist scandal wasn't just about his views on race, it was about his views on her, his willingness to demean and dehumanize her choices, and his fundamental failure as a father to respect and support his daughter. During this period, Brooke was also dealing with her own personal relationships and trying to build a life separate from her family's chaos. She had been engaged to former Dallas Cowboys player Phil Costa in 2013, but that relationship had ended amid the ongoing family drama. The constant stress and public scrutiny made it difficult for her to maintain normal relationships, and she began to realize that her association with her father was becoming a liability in every aspect of her life. The scandal also highlighted the broader issues within the wrestling industry and its culture. Professional wrestling has long had problems with racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination, and Hogan's comments were seen by many as representative of attitudes that were unfortunately common within the industry. Scandal forced WWE and other wrestling organizations to confront these issues more directly, leading to changes in policies and a greater emphasis on diversity and inclusion. As the years passed after the 2015 scandal, it became clear that the damage to the Hogan family was permanent. Brooke's relationship with her father continued to deteriorate, and by the late 2010s, they were rarely speaking. Brooke's mother confirmed this online when she came out to say this.
Brooke doesn't talk to us. She's had twins. She got married. She didn't tell us. She had twins. She didn't tell us. She had a huge fight with Terry. I don't know how that reflected onto me, but she cut me out too.
WWE eventually reinstated Hogan in 2018 after he made what the company deemed appropriate apologies and underwent sensitivity training. However, the reinstatement was controversial, with many fans and wrestlers feeling that he had not done enough to earn forgiveness for his comments. The fact that he was allowed back into WWE while his relationship with his own daughter remained fractured spoke volumes about the different standards applied to public and private forgiveness. The period following the scandal also saw the emergence of other family issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. Brooke began to speak more openly about the abuse she had suffered during her childhood, describing patterns of extreme verbal and mental mistreatment that would frequently turn physical. These revelations painted a picture of a family where the dysfunction went far deeper than just the publicized scandals, but their story was far from over. Family destruction and wrestling's dark legacy. As we enter the final part of the Hogan family saga, we find ourselves in 2025, with Hulk Hogan's death on July 24th at age 71 from cardiac arrest, serving as the tragic conclusion to one of wrestling's most dysfunctional family stories. But his death didn't bring reconciliation or closure. Instead, it highlighted just how completely the family had been destroyed by decades of mistreatment, scandal, and mutual recrimination. Brooke's estrangement from her father had become complete by 2023 when she made the extraordinary decision to ask to be removed from his will. This wasn't just about money, it was about making a final statement that she wanted nothing to do with her father's legacy. She reportedly hadn't spoken to him since September 2023, after a phone call where she expressed concerns about his declining health that he dismissed. The final years of Hulk's life were marked by increasing isolation from his children and mounting health problems. He had undergone over 25 surgeries related to his wrestling career, and by 2025, his body was failing. Yet even as his health deteriorated, the rift with Brooke only deepened. When she married NHL player Stephen Oleksy in 2022, Hulk wasn't invited. When she gave birth to twins in January 2025, he wasn't informed. The depth of the estrangement became clear in Brooke's public statements about the mistreatment she had suffered. In March 2025, described the ill treatment she'd suffered at the hands of her family as vicious and aimed at breaking her spirit. Linda Hogan's emotional breakdown video also revealed the extent of the family's destruction from
My family is in the worst mess.
Linda blamed Hulk for the family's destruction and revealed that Brooke had cut off contact with both parents for about 7-8 years. The family that had once been America's wrestling royalty was now completely fractured, with each member dealing with their own trauma and pain. When Hulk died in July 2025, Brooke was notably absent from WWE tributes. She later explained that WWE hadn't invited her, but many interpreted her absence as a final statement about her relationship with her father's legacy. Even after his death, she maintained that there had been no big fight, but rather a gradual drift caused by her need to establish boundaries. The Hogan family's destruction is particularly tragic because it represents the complete failure of what should have been unconditional love and support. But as devastating as their story is, it's far from unique in the wrestling world. The industry has a long and troubling history of family dysfunction that makes the Hogan saga seem almost typical rather than exceptional. Consider the Von Erich family tragedy, where Fritz Von Erich's control led to the deaths of 5 of his 6 sons. Jack died at age 7 from electrocution and drowning in 1959. David died at 25 in 1984 from what was officially listed as an intestinal issue, but was possibly an overdose. Mike died at 23 in 1987 from an overdose following a brain injury. Chris took his own life at 21 in 1991 amid depression and drug issues. Kerry died at 33 in 1993 following amputation and divorce. Fritz forced wrestling careers on his sons, ignoring their health and well-being, and substance abuse became rampant in the family. Even more shocking is the Chris Benoit murder self-killing of June 2007, where the wrestler strangled his wife Nancy, suffocated his 7-year-old son Daniel with Xanax, and then hung himself. Autopsy results revealed that Benoit's brain resembled that of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient due to concussions, highlighting how the physical demands of wrestling can contribute to mental deterioration and family violence. The pattern continues with cases like Grizzly Smith, whose ill treatment spanned decades and included taking advantage of his children children and stepchildren. His son, Jake Roberts, revealed being conceived via Smith's harassment of his 12-year-old grandmother. Smith did the same thing to multiple children in the family, creating a cycle of trauma that affected multiple generations. More recently, we've seen cases like Billy Jack Haynes, who was charged with the murder of his 85-year-old wife, Jeanette Becraft, in February 2024. Police found Becraft dead from a gunshot wound to the head, and Haynes barricaded himself, leading to a 2-hour standoff. Investigations revealed a history of domestic disputes, with Haynes reportedly isolating Becraft and exhibiting disturbing behavior. As of May 2025, Haynes was ruled mentally unfit for trial due to cognitive decline, with Becraft's estate filing a $750,000 wrongful death lawsuit. The wrestling industry also saw the Buck Zumhofe case, where the wrestler was convicted of taking advantage of his daughter for over a decade. Starting when she was 15 in 1999 and lasting until 2011, Zumhofe's daughter testified to hundreds of assaults. He was sentenced to 25 years plus 10 for attempted escape, and as of July 2025, he remains incarcerated with no parole eligibility until 2031. Even current wrestling stars haven't been immune to family controversies. Nikki Garcia filed for divorce from Artem Chigvintsev in September 2024 after his August domestic violence arrest, with Garcia seeking full custody of their 4-year-old son, Mateo. The settlement was finalized in May 2025, with Garcia paying $3,500 monthly child support plus a $200,000 lump sum. What's particularly disturbing about these cases is how they reveal the toxic culture that has long existed within professional wrestling. The combination of steroid use, physical violence, constant travel, and a boys will be boys mentality has created an environment where domestic violence and child mistreatment are often overlooked or covered up. The industry's emphasis on hypermasculinity and aggression has normalized behaviors that would be unacceptable in most other professions. The steroid culture in wrestling has been particularly damaging to family relationships. Many wrestlers, including Hulk Hogan, have admitted to extensive steroid use, and the documented side effects of these drugs include increased aggression, mood swings, and violent behavior. When you combine these chemical influences with the physical pain and mental stress of a wrestling career, it creates a volatile combination that often explodes within the family home. The constant travel required by wrestling careers has also contributed to family dysfunction. Wrestlers spend months on the road, away from their families, which strains marriages and leaves children feeling abandoned by their parents. When wrestlers do return home, they're often dealing with physical pain, exhaustion, and the pressure to maintain their public personas, leaving little emotional energy for genuine family relationships. The Chris Adams case provides another example of how wrestling culture can destroy families. Adams was charged with manslaughter in the 2000 overdose death of girlfriend Linda Kapengst from GHB and alcohol. Evidence suggested he introduced her to GHB amid a toxic relationship marked by mutual substance abuse and violence. Before trial, Adams was shot dead by friend Brent Parnell during a cocaine-fueled argument. The financial pressures of wrestling have also contributed to family problems. Many wrestlers, despite their fame, struggle financially due to the industry's independent contractor system, lack of health insurance, and the physical toll that shortens careers. This financial stress often leads to wrestlers staying on the road longer, taking more dangerous bumps, and using more drugs to manage pain, all of which further damages family relationships. Perhaps most tragically, the children of wrestlers often suffer the most from these dysfunctional family dynamics. Brooke Hogan's experience is unfortunately typical. Growing up in a household where ill treatment was normalized, where public image was more important than private relationships, and where the child's needs were secondary to the parent's career and ego. The pattern of abuse in wrestling families often continues across generations, as children who grow up in these environments often struggle to form healthy relationships themselves. The normalization of violence, the lack of emotional support, and the constant public scrutiny create lasting trauma that affects not just the wrestlers themselves, but their children and grandchildren. The wrestling industry has begun to address some of these issues in recent years. WWE has implemented wellness policies, drug testing, and counseling services for their performers. However, the culture change has been slow, and many of the wrestlers from earlier eras, like Hulk Hogan, never received the support they needed to break these destructive patterns. Brooke's decision to break the cycle by removing herself from her father's life and will represents a form of survival that many children of wrestlers have had to embrace. She has spoken about therapy and the importance of breaking the chain of abuse and dysfunction that characterized her childhood. The tragedy of Hulk Hogan's death in 2025 is not just that a wrestling legend passed away, but that he died estranged from his daughter, having never taken responsibility for the damage he caused to his family. Even reports that he nearly died during childbirth of her twins failed to prompt any any attempt at reconciliation. Her husband, Stephen Alexi, attempted to maintain some contact with Hulk amid the rift, but even the birth of grandchildren wasn't enough to bridge the gap that decades of abuse and racism had created. Following Hulk's death, Brooke shared an emotional tribute addressing their estrangement. She expressed gratitude for one final chance to say "I love you" and reflected on his love despite the pain. Brooke's twins, Oliver and Molly, born in January 2025, represent hope for the future, a new generation that won't be subjected to the abuse and dysfunction that characterized previous generations of the Hogan family. By choosing to break contact with her parents and remove herself from her father's will, Brooke has made a powerful statement that the cycle of abuse ends with her.